The truth about the Georgia State Election Board's new rules, the hand counting rule, specifically, among others, with a special guest that's going to be joining us here in a moment. Give this a second to go live on Rockfin here as well, then we'll dive in. Hope everybody's having a good afternoon. Good Wednesday afternoon. The fight over how elections are conducted has intensified as we've gotten closer and closer to Election Day. And this battle was on full display this past Friday in Atlanta as the organization that's at the center of this fight nationwide. This is all over the mainstream news. The Georgia State Elections Board. They voted to pass a number of new rules, including a ballot hand counting rule that, if implemented, will affect not only the way the election works here, but potentially the way it works in other swing states, according to the media. And Garland, when he comes on the show, can help us understand the potential impact nationwide. But the mainstream media will tell you that these new ballot hand counting rules, which the rules requires all counties, I believe, to hand count the number of ballots cast, that it's not as good as computer counting. They say that it would require these overworked and tired poll workers to count thousands of ballots in one night, and it would lead to human error that would delay certification and cause confusion. And they also say that the rules are nefarious, that they're not actually designed to create election transparency, that actually these rules are created and passed by Trump-loving, election-denying conspiracy theorists whose only goal is to delay that certification and cause that confusion. And here to clear things up for us, to tell us the truth about these rules and their impact and the motive behind them, is the man who has led the fight for election integrity, not just the past 4 years, but for over 2 decades now in Georgia. The guy who's going to give you the best information and have the best statutory law and sources to back it up, unlike the media, the legend, Garland Favorito of Voter GA. Garland, thank you for joining me this afternoon. How you doing?
Great, Binkley. Good to be back again.
It's good to see. I'm eager to talk to you because I was at that state elections board meeting for the first part of it this past Friday, and there was a line out the door. I got there at 8. I didn't get there early enough to get in the room that you guys were in, so I watched in an overflow room, and it was interesting to see the number of activists that had gotten there to fill up the public comment during the first part of the meeting, and see the people in the overflow room who were favoring one side over the other. I'll tell you this. The people wearing the mask while sitting in the overflow room were definitely favoring the progressive Democrat-leaning stop all the rules side. It was just really interesting to see these different groups of people. You could see the blue shirts organized for the stop the rules, and then you could see the MAGA hats in there. And it was fascinating to watch. You were in there firsthand. I believe you spoke after I left. Tell us the truth about the new rules that were passed. I think 6 rules were passed. Is that correct?
That's right. I had 2 of them. There were 6 out of 11 were passed Friday, and then on Monday, another one was passed. I think it was 7 out of 14 altogether. So the board carefully considered each rule, and they passed some, and they decided to punt on a few others, which I thought were good as well. So it was they were very thoughtful in their considerations. And we got some really good rules out of it. One of the ones that you mentioned was the reconciliation rule. We have previously gotten rules for making sure that those who certify can look at all the documents they need to and make the inquiry that they need to, even though that's already in the law. That wasn't really anything new.
That's what I thought was interesting when you pointed that out last show, the statutory law that already requires that. And so these rules are almost calling attention to that and trying to reinforce them.
Yeah, you could argue that they weren't even necessary. They just, exactly as you said, they just reinforced the law because in several cases, like Fulton County, the elections workers are refusing to produce the documents, the election supervisor, that the board needs to certify. And they have to attest that everything is true and accurate. That's the definition of to certify, what certify means. So those were just, as you said, confirming the existing Georgia law. And then we had the reconciliation rule, which we can talk about. I had two rules that were passed for another reconciliation to make sure that we can detect the QR code defect that causes the ballots not to be tabulated. So,
And the confusion, like, so that was a hole in the chain of custody before that people didn't realize. Is that correct? The QR code, it didn't necessarily line up with what you voted. You had no way to confirm that.
well, right, because what's in the QR code, you never verify.
Right.
And then on top of that, we found out that the QR code's got errors in it, and it can create errors, and then therefore the system will not tabulate the ballot, even though the scanner says that it accepted it. So we were able to get two rules passed to ensure that we can detect that error, and that's a really critical error because the Tennessee Secretary of State recommended discontinuance of the use of that the same Dominion system we use here, the Dominion 5.5 system, and they did discontinue that in Williamson County, Tennessee.
Unlike the Georgia Secretary of State, who has come out and said that he thinks that maybe this rule is illegal. So you're pointing to statutory law. I watch these CNN and these MSNBC commentators, and Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who's a pretend Republican, say, well, it's illegal. And yet they point to no statutory law. And the last show you did with us, you very meticulously went through the statutory law. How can they continue to make this argument?
Because they lie.
I guess that's the best way, yeah.
Yeah, that's the simple answer. Yeah, he was talking about the other reconciliation rule that another lady had, and her rule, Miss Alexander, her rule reconciled the physical ballots to the ballot scanner count. So now we know when we see a ballot scanner count, we know that it'll be accurate because we will reconcile the tabulator tape to it and we'll reconcile the actual physical ballots. So now we have the assurance that the scanner has, in fact, at least accepted and tabulated the correct number of ballots. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to tabulate the correct race results, but at least it's a starting point where we know that we've got the correct number of ballots. So, and that was all her rule did. And it was something that a lot of the counties already do. But
it seemed like such a burden on watching these people talk during the public comment. I sent you the link and the image of the mobilized group for Democrats that got there at 7 a.m., I believe. And I was doing a tally on how many of the first 30 were activists for Democrats against the rules versus people who were for the rules. And I believe it was something like 25-5 on the Democrat side. And they were all saying the same thing for the most part, which was interesting because part of the rules of the session were that you're not supposed to read something that somebody else wrote. I know for a fact that they got those talking points in their emails scripted for them, and they were reading something that somebody else wrote. But nevertheless, one of the main talking points on top of all these conspiracy theorists, election denying, they all use the same terminology. It was that you already have these overworked poll workers, and a couple of the people who spoke were like, I'm a poll worker. We've been here, we work 18 hours, and we're afraid of numbers, and the computers are so much better than us, and human error is, the computers do it a lot better. Is there truth to that? Because that's what Anderson Cooper keeps telling people definitively, or is it the other way around?
Well, you can't trust anything Anderson Cooper says. I mean, I wouldn't even flip him on. He's got his own agenda, which we can go into a little bit if you want. So, it's in regards to the machine count versus the hand count, the accuracy. I'll go back to the DeKalb 2022 District 2 Commission primary, in which the machines declared the wrong winner. And that was the only race that was audited. And it shorted Michelle Long Spears 75% of the vote. She got actually of 4,000 when she did the hand count. The machines only got one count. So there's never been in the history of hand counting, there's never been a hand count that produced a 75% error.
Yeah, that'd be
So
pretty bad. That's a
that's
really tired poll worker.
yes, yes. There is no poll worker that's ever been that tired where they miss 75% of the vote. But the machine can. The machine can miss 100% and get everything backwards. So that's why you need hand counts. And, that race was the only race that was audited in 2022 when DeKalb County wanted to audit more. The Secretary of State threatened them. According to the election board members, they acknowledged that in the meeting that I was in. I think it was July 14th, if I'm not mistaken, in 2022. And then he never audited any other races, and that was the same primary in which he declared himself the winner of the Republican primary by 51% of the vote, and did not have to run off. We have challenged that race, and we still haven't been to court on it.
Why hasn't that one been to court? Process and standing type stuff?
No, we don't know. We've never had a hearing on that challenge. We are anxious to go on that, but it's never come up.
That's crazy. And I want to just really highlight the rule, like you said. They're not verifying the votes. They're just matching the number of ballots, correct? So it's not as difficult as they would lead you to believe in the news, where they have to go look at the votes and try to verify that. They're just making sure the ballots are even, and it wouldn't actually require a difficult task. There was even somebody who was in a county who did the hand counting who went up and said, it's not that hard. It's not that hard. This is how we did it. Yet they would tell you that it's the most difficult task on the planet for the most overworked, underappreciated people you've ever met.
Yeah, so the average precinct has 500 or 600 ballots cast on election day, and you just to count those, just flip them over. You count them upside down so you can't see what's on them, and you just count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So to do that for 500 or 600 times, it only takes about 10 minutes. Then you have another person do the same thing to make sure that the count's correct. If they match, then in 20 minutes, you're done. The only reason it would take longer is if they didn't match and they had a reconcile problem and the machines didn't count correctly. If the machines didn't count correctly, that's what we want to know.
Doesn't this discriminate against people who can't count but want to be poll workers? I half expect them to make that kind of argument, right? Because the reasoning that they're using, it seems so obvious to me that that's the best way to do it. Yet you have these people go up there and they make these arguments that are, very creative arguments, but I don't know how anybody gets them. In fact, Stacey Abrams was on MSNBC this morning. Can I show you a quick clip of her echoing some of the things that we heard from the activist during that meeting?
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, she's on, MSNBC with Morning Joe and Morning Mika, Joe Brzezinski. It's a very credible news show. Stacey's promoting her new children's book where she probably propagandizes kids. She's a fiction writer, right? She writes called Selena something, not Selena Gomez, but something weird like that. And she writes romance novels.
How do you feel about the integrity of Georgia's vote ahead of the elections right now?
Unfortunately, we are once again headed towards a confrontation where we pit democracy against those who do not want it to be made manifest. The state election board is taking actions that are patently unlawful and that are designed to create a fail point in our system. The challenge is that if we think about voter suppression, there's can you register and stay on the rolls? Can you cast a ballot? And the third one is can that ballot be counted? And they are doing their best to ensure that ballots don't get counted, or at least counted towards certification. And so they've done two things. One is give individual members of county election boards the ability to not certify. And the second is this new hand count rule, which on its face may seem benign, but think about the fact that they're allowing 3 people to count what will amount to in each precinct. In Fulton County, that's more than 500,000 votes. In Gwinnett County, 400,000. In DeKalb County, 300,000. They've got to count every one of those ballots. That's going to delay and possibly demean the integrity of the ballot. And that's the goal. The goal is not to win. The goal is to cast and cause so much chaos that we don't count Georgia's votes. And that should be deeply concerning to anyone, because what starts in Georgia, unfortunately, goes everywhere.
How do you feel?
So, Garland, is this true? Are you simply an agent of chaos?
Well, it's such a ridiculous lie. There's so many things wrong there. I mean, one, she says that they're trying to prevent counting, but the rule says we want to count the ballots. So that's crazy. And the objective is not to create chaos. The objective is to make sure that the machine's counting correctly. And apparently she knows that the machines are going to cheat for her, and therefore she doesn't want them to count correctly. But the other thing is, this is all hype and propaganda, because what they're trying to do is to basically get their base fired up. They're trying to psychologically program their base to give them an issue that doesn't exist so that they can turn out their vote. The bottom line is everything they're doing is lying to create a get out the vote campaign. That's really what it all boils down to. There's hardly a shred of truth in what she said there.
And that's what her role is. I told people, I said, you haven't seen Stacey Abrams in a while, but as we get closer to the election, she's going to come out and be more prominent, because she's the girl who goes and gets drunk people at bars and registers them to vote, and they go pick them up on buses, and just like they're going to a Kamala rally, they bus them to the polls, and after they've given them a bunch of benefits. I mean, it's vote harvesting and finding the loopholes, and that is what Stacey Abrams is great at, that and lying. And I also think they're creating inoculating people from the possibility that it is stolen again if they need to steal it, by creating this idea that people who are promoting election integrity, very reasonable rules, are actually just trying to steal it for Trump. And that way, if somebody says, here's a problem, half of the country or however many people they're able to influence say, they're just trying to commit an insurrection again. And I think it kind of solidifies the ability to steal it, or at least that's what they're trying to do. I don't know. It's crazy to me. And I know there's lawsuits that are being threatened. I know that she called later for Brian Kemp to intervene and do something. What's going on with that? What are they trying to get Brian Kemp to do to stop the rules?
Well, Brian Kemp, they've asked him. There was a while back they asked him to remove the board members, which is absurd. I mean, Brian Kemp's not going to remove any board members. He doesn't have the legal authority to remove legislative appointed board members, because he's the governor. You know, he doesn't have cross-branch power, and why would he remove Republican board members to begin with? The whole thing is a bit of insanity, but it's great media hype. The media all comes out and they put a microphone under all these people's nose and report back the comments, even though that it doesn't have any chance in heck to actually.
There's no substance to it whatsoever.
So, but yeah, it's just, again, that's all part of the political hype. Psychologically program your base. It's a get out the vote campaign that's packed around a pile of lies. That's really all it is.
And have you heard an argument based on the statutes, the law? Like, you gave us a great argument using statutory law. Have you heard an argument in opposition using statutory law? Because I have yet to hear one. I've only heard vague references to them saying it's illegal.
Well, no, and that's why you can tell it's a lie. You know, if they were telling the truth, they'd go up there with the exact citation they quoted, they'd read it right out of the Georgia Code like we did on your show. But since they don't have that, then they make these vague references. And of course, this complicit news media just poly-parrots their comments as though they were truth. And they don't ever research to find out what was true. we did at their press conference pass out the actual Georgia statutes to all the news. So all the news people that were there for the original press conference with the legislators, I forgot that occurred about a month or so ago, all of them got the actual statutes that proved that the legislators were lying when they conducted the press conference. But
did you see any reporting on those statutes?
No. If you notice that all the mainstream media reporting never reports a single Georgia code statute, even though we gave it to them. We literally handed it to every single news organization there so that they would know the truth.
Yeah.
And they barely any of them actually reported.
Well, they're all too busy trying to get on Kamala's bus. The AJC is funded by the Google News Initiative. I'm going to be honest with you. I saw one of the AJC writers who does nothing but write. It's like CNN through the voice of the AJC, which is an organized effort to use local, more trusted people, because they did a study saying these local organizations are more trusted than national, so they get them in their pocket to say the national talking point. And I started heckling one of the ones who I see always lying when I saw him get off the bus with Tim Walsh the other day. It was a good time, but I also saw him reporting the same type of lies Stacey Abrams was talking about when it comes to these rules. Now, what came out earlier in reference to Brian Kemp, I noticed this right before the show, is from the Washington Post. It says Democrats take legal action. Here, I'll show you the headline here. Democrats take legal action against the Georgia Election Board. They're accusing GOP members of the state election board of holding an illegal meeting and illegally passing rules critics say will sow chaos in the race, and they're focusing it on Kemp here. They filed a petition late Tuesday in Fulton Superior Court claiming Kemp is required to hold hearings on matters and to remove the board members if he finds, that's what you were talking about a moment ago, that they violated the law. So is this something new? Was it not an official petition yet?
That is old. That was filed away a while back. I'm interested as to what the date on that is.
September 25th. This was posted at 12:30 p.m. today.
Okay, well, that was filed a while back, and
yeah,
I don't know if maybe the Democrats have joined on to that lawsuit, but I can tell you, here's what happened on the so-called illegal meeting. They're claiming that the Republicans conducted a secret meeting on July the 12th, this Friday. They had a meeting on Tuesday. The chairman of the board then went back on Wednesday, and they reconvened, and he decided that since some of the board members were dialing in, they only had 2 present. He just arbitrarily decided not to have the meeting that day. And I never asked the petitioners. The petitioners wanted to go ahead and do their meeting, do their rules anyway. And then just, even if the board members had to dial in, as long as they were listening and could vote. So, but the chairman made his decision on his own, and then he didn't close out the meeting properly. So that would have lost all the information from Tuesday. And so the board reconvened on Friday. The chair didn't want to post the meeting notice, so they posted it on the door of the meeting room as what is required. That's what the Georgia legislature posts 24 hours in advance, the notice of their meeting. And that's what they did. So they conducted the meeting, and the one group said that, oh, this is a secret meeting, it's illegal. But in reality, there were about 300 people there, including me. Tamara and I were there for the meeting. We couldn't even get in the room. It was so crowded. So it was clearly not a secret meeting. We did our press conference a week or 2 ago, and I showed the picture of the room so you could see that it was just really about standing room only. So hardly a secret meeting, and the meeting only lasts about 20 minutes anyway. So it
sounds like somebody who is in opposition to the rules intentionally conducted the meeting wrong so that it could be called illegal. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's what it appears to me. Yeah, it appears to me that the chairman really has been seeming to undermine the majority of the board members who want election integrity.
And then
Scary.
go ahead.
Yeah.
One of the other board members who opposes the rule runs to CNN and MSNBC to say that y'all's motive is the same as basically say the same thing Stacey Abrams does, and does this PR propaganda brainwashing thing. And what I wonder is how effective this effort is. It's obviously effective on the activists that they can get to go there. But I was telling you before the show, I went to Kamala's rally. Of course, they don't tell anybody about it. Nobody was really there. There wasn't much enthusiasm afterwards. A lot of it's made up. In your opinion, do you believe that these Met tactics that they're using are effective on everyday people outside of what we see in the news media?
I don't think so, because they don't make any sense. I think they're very effective in mobilizing their base, who can easily be psychologically programmed with anything. But in return, in terms to the average individual, I mean, the average individual is going to wonder why there's such a hullabaloo.
It's in any other context, it's so reasonable. It makes perfect sense to hand count. But they flip logic and reality, which they've done a lot in the past few years. What about the other rules? Is there anything significant that you think needs to be highlighted about the other rules that were passed?
Well, yeah, there was a rule that was passed that identifies the areas and the locations where poll watchers can be. I think that was a very significant rule. That was proposed by Fulton County Election Board member Julie Adams. And it gives precise instructions on where these poll watchers can be. And so they'll be able to cover things that have never been able to be covered before. I think that was significant. We talked about my tool to detect the QR code. This one will make sure that the other reconciliation rule will make sure that the physical ballots have the correct number. The scanner has the correct number of physical ballots. So those are four of the rules that were passed. There was one I think I mentioned about making sure people have everything they need, both in terms of documents and time to do that. Even though that's really not a change. So that's 6 of the rules. And then there was the 7th one that was passed Monday. Made sure that all ballot images, cast vote records, all the electronic records are available 3 days after the election. So I think that is really significant as well. So
and didn't they destroy those records last time?
Yes, there were 1.7 million original ballot images destroyed in the 2020 election based on our 159 county survey. It was unbelievable how many ballot images were destroyed. And that's in violation of both federal and state law. And even the Democrat board member, Sarah Tender Gazal, acknowledged that I was correct when I originally presented this rule for rulemaking, and said that we need it because of the law. And she, as the only lawyer in the board, actually agreed with me and said, yes, I think we need to do something. I do agree with you about the law thing. So we never got that passed completely. It was accepted into rulemaking, but it wasn't passed. And it wasn't passed because there was no money for it. And that flies right at the foot of Brad Ravensburger and Governor Brian Kemp. The legislature has funded this board, and they have not received the money that the legislature has funded yet. That's due to Brian Kemp. But the bigger issue is, why did Brad Ravensburger buy a $107 million plus system and spend another $10 million a year in expenditures if he can't afford $100,000 for enough memory cards to make sure that you don't have to destroy them or overwrite them?
Yeah, so, that's a very reasonable point that they overlook. And the fact that they're saying that hand counting is much worse despite the evidence that you presented and that was presented by one of the poll workers who's done it at the meeting.
Right.
The fact that the entire Fulton County government was held hostage by cyber hackers for like 2 months and their systems were down, that they're saying that we must trust the computers, and you have a bunch of Democrat activists who are afraid of numbers and counting saying, we're stupid, you must use the computers, in a county where they didn't even have their own online systems up for 2 months. It's baffling to me. My favorite person that I saw at the hearing was the veteran who got up and was like, I'm a poll worker. I'm perfectly fine counting the ballots. I'm not going to be tired and overworked. And, in opposition to all the other people, just like, I'm such a tired poll worker. Look at my hands and the paper cuts. I might as well have been doing that. Yeah, the one lady go up there where she goes up and she had somebody like her assistant come up with a stack of papers because it's so much paper. She's like, I was afraid I would drop all of this paper, and I'm expected to count all of it. I had to hire an assistant. I mean, that was a little privileged attitude she had there, having an intern bring those papers up.
Well, that was not an election official. That was just a political activist.
Yes.
And she brought up 3 times more paper than what any precinct manager would actually have to count.
Yeah.
As I was saying earlier, that was 500 to 600 average number of ballots per precinct. And I think that stack she was showing had 1,750.
That's interesting.
So that was 3 times what you would actually have to count.
It was theatrics is all it was. It was just a theatrics. So, yeah. It felt like that they sent a bunch of activists there to hope to capture one of them delivering their message perfectly so they can then clip that and share it across the news. And I think that was an attempt at becoming that one. There weren't too many, other than the ACLU guy who was a prick lawyer. He's like, we're gonna sue you. So you basically, I mean, it sounded like he was just threatening people his entire time. Do you remember that guy?
No, because I wasn't there. I was at home working on my presentation, and we got there very late. I ended up getting there just literally about 3 minutes before I had to go on and present my 2 rules.
Yeah.
I was working on them all morning at home, and I did not see him, his public comment.
Well, so this guy basically was like, you guys, if you pass these rules, you're going to get sued by the ACLU and others. So you might as well not pass the rules, which brings me to my next question. Do you think these rules will be implemented knowing that they are going to have a full-fledged attack to try to stop them?
Yes, they'll be implemented. They've passed. They'll be required. Somebody will try to sue, but that will require a temporary injunction to stop it. I doubt seriously if a judge is going to give a temporary injunction for illogical reasons to Democrat Party activists. So, it's possible. We've seen stranger things, but I think it's not really likely.
Well, I hope so, because the rules look to me like they're shoring up the loopholes that can be used to steal an election. And it looks to me like they're trying to prevent that from happening so they can make sure those loopholes are there. So great work. Frighten Me says, great shirt, Garland. Voter GA with the machines unplugged there. And a couple other comments for you. I love you, Garland. Strong man, standing up for us. Little folks, says Sam. Oh my gosh, hi Zach, says JC. Yeah, I love that. Unplug Georgia's election, says, which you can get those at voterga.org, I'm guessing.
Well, actually, we didn't put them up for fulfillment. We're running low right now. But if you catch us at an event, you can get one. We still have a couple sizes left, and we'll be up in, let's see, we're in Fayette County tonight for a poll watcher training in downtown Fayette GOP headquarters. Next Tuesday, we're going to be in Lake Lanier for the Michael Flynn event.
What's that?
Michael Flynn's coming to town. General Flynn, not Lieutenant General, but he's a full-fledged. He's a general who's got a great movie out, and he was the Donald Trump's first pick for.
Right. They put him in jail, right?
Well, they tried to, and they eventually beat all that back. And he's out campaigning right now, and basically, showing his movie around the country.
Yeah, that's awesome.
He's a real patriot. He's going to be in town on Tuesday at Lake Lanier. So that is kind of our schedule for the next couple of the next week or so.
And there's an event page on your website, right, where people can go to check that out, and they can donate to help you guys out at voterga.org, which that's some of the best ways to help y'all out. I believe donating, going to support the events. There were a number of people who were at the Georgia State Elections Board meeting. I mean, the line was out the door. There were far more people there than there were at Kamala's rally that I went to afterwards, where it was a ghost town outside. So there was, even though the activists filled up the public comment section, there was a lot of people I saw in support, and being in the room was interesting. In the spillover room watching, you could see, because a round of applause would break out when a group of people supported the rule or supported what was said, or you could hear people kind of muffle under their breath, or you could just see them wearing COVID masks and you knew exactly where they stood in that room. But it was a very interesting dynamic, and it was a packed house, and it does take a lot of bravery to do what you guys are doing. Quickly, what is the poll training that you guys are doing, poll watcher training? What does that consist of?
Well, we go through what to look for. Tamara does this training. I'm going to do a little piece tonight on the machines, but she goes through and explains what you need to know to be a poll watcher. She also has a poll worker training, but I think they have already closed I think the deadline's passed for poll workers, to my knowledge. But she has a little training program, which, regardless of which one you are, it will tell you everything to look for, what numbers to check on the machines, and how to fill out a form to report any incidents, and just, the basic, what you need to know. And we do that. It's a pretty comprehensive training, runs about an hour and a half. And then we're around to take questions. So.
It's so interesting. You have this ongoing effort to try and create this transparency, and then you have the trainings on the other side to just try and stop it and protect the ability to commit fraud.
Yeah, it's that's really the funniest part about it. What that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to protect the ability to commit fraud.
Frighten Me says the PBD podcast had someone who could hack voter machines this morning. Hasn't had a chance to watch. You've talked about how somebody demonstrated that the voter machines can be hacked in court.
Well, yeah, that was Dr. Alex Haldeman, and he did that twice in court, hacked the machines in front of the judge. So,
has he ever hacked a human's ability to hand count? Has he ever demonstrated that?
No, he hasn't been able to demonstrate that yet.
Are there any more state election board meetings before the election?
Yes, indeed. There'll probably be two more. One is on October 8th, and then that is just before early voting starts. And then there will be another one, most likely, I think, by the end of October. But it's hard to say right now. It depends on what happens on October the 8th.
And will there be new rules presented, or?
Well, I don't know. There's always a possibility of an emergency rule to be presented. I know that next meeting, they've asked some of the counties to come in and explain why they're refusing to clean up their voter rolls, despite the legal language that they're required to do that. So that's going to be one topic at the October 8th meeting. I don't know what else will be on the agenda just yet.
The agenda, as I believe the Secretary of State's website is supposed to be up there, and the meeting starts at 9. It did this past one, and I got there at 8, and I wasn't in time to get in the first 30 public comments. So I'm going to get there earlier because I'm sure the activists will be there again. One more question, then we'll get out of here. I appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Sure.
What would you say to this other part of the narrative that it's too late in the game? We've already trained all the poll workers, and now you're trying to change the rules, as though that's really difficult to teach people to count.
Well, none of the rules. First of all, they already know how to count. They count ballots now, but none of the rules impact the voter experience, and none of them, hardly any of them, impact the poll workers' experience. So it's just an excuse not to do anything. And that was something that Gavrio talked about. And Gavrio is the Georgia Election Officials, Voter Registration Officials Association of Voter Registration Election Officials. So they said that, oh, we can't do any more. It's too close to election. And really, the bottom line is that's just an excuse to do nothing. And what we are looking at here is, and it's very disturbing that the election officials have come out. The president of the organization came out and made that claim. We can't do anything more. It's too close. And what that tells the voters of the state of Georgia is that the elections officials, or at least the president, wants the election officials to just be box checkers. He doesn't want to conduct a real election in which you know that the correct candidate was elected. They just want an election where they can just check off a box and say they've done it. Doesn't matter whether the right candidate was elected. All they want is a quiet election that's not controversial. And that's not what the voters of the state of Georgia want. They want an accurate election. They want assurance that the election is accurate.
They don't want real watchdogs. They want people in the can for them. And I thought it was hilarious. We've already trained them, and you expect us to train them again? You don't have to teach them how to count paper. It's not that difficult, as though that would take some extensive training. Everybody pick up your paper. 1, 2 follows 1, 3 follows. It's just, how brain dead are these people if you have to teach them how to count in this new training session? Garland, thank you for hanging out with us. VoterGA.org. Check it out. Support Garland. I am going to go to the next hearing. I'm hopefully going to be there earlier this time.
One more thing that's real important, Binkley, before I forget. On Monday at 9:30, there will be a lawsuit that's going to be heard, and that is the encryption key lawsuit. And that's the one where the encryption keys for the Dominion system are in clear plain text in the database. And that is going to be heard Monday at 9:30, and I believe that's going to be in Fulton County Superior Court. But we will post that. Yeah, it's courtroom 5A. Scott McAfee is going to hear that case. I don't have a lot of confidence in him, but he will be hearing that case, and we will see where that goes. That's going to be.
Is Scott McAfee, the guy who was on the Fannie? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and he was also the Inspector General for Brian Kemp.
Right, and he worked he worked for Fannie Willis a long time ago.
So I don't see that going much of anywhere.
Is that open to the public?
It is. Courtroom 5A. So we will. It'll be interesting to see where that case goes.
Yeah, I might try to check that out. That's interesting. So, look out for that. And thanks for filling us in, because these hearings and stuff, which didn't get a lot of attention before, starting to get more now in court cases like this is where the stuff that actually affects how things work happen. And the media will lie to you about them if you don't see them for yourself or hear from people like Garland. So thanks again, Garland, for everything that you do and for coming on the show to tell us about it. Thank you guys for jumping in to give us some great comments and hang out with us this afternoon. And we'll talk to you guys next time. VoterGA.org to help support Garland and VoterGA and election integrity. You guys have a fantastic rest of y'all's day.
Okay.